bit. So we can go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jancy Long. I'm the Director of Provider Supports here. And we've got Lexi, who's our Northeast Region VPK Facilitator. I don't know. I think I get it right. Okay, thank you. I see you nodding. Thank you. So she's going to go over the upcoming VPK accountability. This is the same presentation that was done in October. So if you've heard it already, I still encourage you to stay on. It's one of those things that, at least for myself, I had to listen a couple of times to the presentation before I felt I understood what the VPK accountability was. So I encourage you to listen again, even if you've heard it before. We are recording it, and I will send it out later this week, hopefully. And if you have questions, I'm just going to ask, please put it in the chat, and we'll check in every so often. You can also raise your hand too. We may not call on you right away, but I do want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to ask questions. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Lexi and let her share some great information with all of us.
Awesome. Thank you, Nancy. Everybody see my PowerPoint? Awesome.
Yes, but you're hard to hear.
Is that any better?
Not for me. I don't know if everyone else. I can just turn up my volume a lot though. Everybody else, can you thumbs up if you can hear? Okay, I see a thumbs up, so we're good. Thanks.
Okay. All right, so my name is Lexi Longieri. I'm your Northeast VPK Regional Facilitator with the Division of Early Learning. Today we are doing the presentation on the VPK Accountability System for the performance metrics and designations. As we get started, like Jancy said, if you have any questions, make sure that you put them in the chat box. And Julie said she can barely hear. Let me drop off and try rejoining. I'll be right back.
Okay, sounds good.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. All right. We're having some audio difficulties.
All right,
so thanks for your patience. Is that better for everybody?
Sounds great.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. And let me share my screen again. Let's try this again. Got boxes everywhere. Okay, so VPK accountability for provider performance with the metrics and designations. And like Jancy said, if you've seen this presentation before, it is the same information, but it is also nice to hear it a couple times. There's a lot kind of going on with these calculations. And so throughout the 2023-2024 VPK program year, DEL was developing the provider performance metric and designation in partnership with our contractor at the University of South Florida, the Council for Early Grade Success, and the Accountability Research and Measurement Office at the Florida Division of Education. In the past, VPK provider accountability was based mainly on kindergarten readiness assessment data, which was assessment data of VPK children collected at the beginning of the kindergarten year. Data collected at the beginning of kindergarten year will no longer be used for VPK provider accountability. VPK provider accountability will now be based on all the data collected during the VPK program year as required by Florida statutes. This is helpful. It's really creating a much improved system for VPK accountability. And so today we are going to discuss that accountability system. This is going to be our agenda for this presentation. So we'll take a look at the accountability system. We'll talk about the different performance metric components, the performance metric calculations, the performance designations, a couple of special circumstances, and the implementation of these metrics and designations. So an accountability system is a set of practices used to make progress towards goals. And where we're not reaching our goals, this accountability system can help provide data that helps us identify opportunities for improvement and practices to replicate. So this establishes those expectations, so making it very clear on what we are trying to achieve in our VPK programs, identifying ownership of who's responsible for making those expectations happen. This also gives us assessment data, so this allows us to look at our data and really use it for data-informed decision making. This also establishes communication, so we're able to readily share information with stakeholders across the state on how our VPK programs are doing, and then also identifying consequences. So if we have a VPK provider that's not meeting those expectations, really clearly outlining what those consequences and end results are going to be to help improve our VPK programs. So the new VPK accountability system was required from the Department of Education. They required us to develop a new VPK accountability system and outline requirements for that new system. It is comprised of 3 components, including program quality, student achievement, and student learning gains. This also is required for us to be able to calculate a metric and a designation for every VPK provider every year, but it could not be a letter grade. And then able to calculate a metric and designation within 45 days of the program's end. And then where funds and legislation deemed appropriate for those providers that are going above and beyond expectations, making sure that we're able to recognize those VPK providers who are excelling. So like I said, there are 3 components for the metrics and calculations, and the first one's going to be that program quality. So across all 3 components, there's a possible total of up to 100 points. For program quality, 50 of those points goes towards the component 1. And so program quality is going to be measured by the class program assessment. The metric is going to use the composite program assessment score. The composite program assessment score is an average of all of the Division of Early Learning adopted dimension scores, which excludes the negative climate score. Class was implemented in VPK beginning in the 2022-2023 program year, so this is not really anything new. And those VPK program assessment requirements are detailed in Rule 6M-8.621. This is the breakdown of how many points a provider would earn based off of their class composite score, and a VPK provider can earn up to 50 points in this first component for program quality. The actual number of points earned will depend on a VPK provider's composite program assessment score. So for example, if we have a provider who earns a composite score of 5.25, that provider will receive 40% of the 50 possible points, which is 20 points. One thing to highlight on this table, we have included a line labeled as below 4.00. There is still a contracting threshold for VPK. Providers that do not earn a 4.00 or higher on their composite score are not eligible to contract for VPK in the future. However, legislation does not exempt these providers from earning a metric or designation for the year that they did provide VPK. So there's still that contracting threshold of the 4.00 on your composite score, but because due to rules and regulations, the Division of Early Learning is still required to give them that metric. Okay, I'm going to take a pause here and see what kind of questions we have. If I can find, there you are.
I don't see any questions in the chats, so it seems like so far we're doing good.
Okay, thank you. All right. Our second component, component 2, is student achievement. So component 2 and component 3 are going to look at STAR early literacy FAST data. And this is where the other 50 points is going to come into play. And component 2 is going to look at student achievement. This is measured by the Fast Start Early Literacy Assessment. This metric looks at what percentage of eligible children are demonstrating kindergarten readiness during the VPK PM3 window. Fast Start Early Literacy was also implemented in VPK beginning in the 2022-2023 program year. So again, this is not something new. And the Fast Start Early Literacy requirements are detailed in Rule 6M-8.620. A couple of things to define here. Eligible children when it comes to Component 2 and Component 3. This is going to mean children who have completed more than 50% of the instructional hours at a provider's VPK program, and a provider must have at least 4 eligible children with a PM3 assessment in order to receive points for the student achievement component. So keep in mind that this definition is only with regards to the VPK accountability system, not the VPK program in general. This is also a different threshold for inclusion in an accountability system than what we've used in the past. The other item to define here is kindergarten readiness, and this is meaning a student is obtaining a unified scale score, or USS, of 707 during the progress monitoring 3 window. The kindergarten readiness is not a new concept, but the cut score did change from 690 to 707 in September 2024. And you may be asking yourself, why are we talking about kindergarten readiness? Didn't I just say that we weren't going to look at what happens to students in kindergarten? And you're right, I did, and we won't. Often when we hear discussions of kindergarten readiness, it happens after a school year has started, and we're told that a certain percentage of kindergartners were ready when they got to kindergarten, and a certain percentage were not. And so this is based on how those children do during PM1 of the kindergarten year, and whether they scored at or above kindergarten readiness score. So even though our accountability system does not look at the scores our VPK children earned when they get to kindergarten, we're still influenced by the idea of kindergarten readiness. In fact, in certain sections of the Florida statute, it requires the VPK accountability methodology to align with determining a child's readiness for kindergarten. So we will use that same kindergarten readiness score, the 707. We cannot control what these children experience after they complete our VPK program, which can be several months before they enter kindergarten. But with this new system in place, there is less doubt about whether we did our jobs as VPK instructors to get them ready for kindergarten when they're earning that kindergarten readiness score before they even leave us. For component 2 and component 3, there are some calculations, and if you're not comfortable with math, that's completely fine. We just want to be very transparent about how these metrics are being calculated and determined. So for component 2, for student achievement, a VPK provider can earn up to 20 points in this component. Actual points earned will depend on the calculation of the number of eligible children achieving 707 divided by the number of eligible children taking PM3. That gets multiplied by 100, that gets multiplied by 0.20, and that will give us the number of achievement points. Scores do have to be whole numbers, so values of 0.5 or greater are rounded up, and less than 0.5 are rounded down. We're working on some communications and tools to help providers understand their metrics and play around to see what it would take to get you where you want to go. And we want everyone to understand how their metric is calculated. So we just want you to stay focused on your expertise with the work that really matters, and teaching and helping providers teach children is what matters. We do have a couple of sample calculations as we go through the presentation to help make this stick a little easier. So for component 2, if we had 6 eligible children take the STAR Early Literacy at PM3 at Christie's Pre-K, 5 of those children achieved a 707 or higher. So we have 5 divided by 6 multiplied by 100 multiplied by 0.20, and this provider would have earned 16.66 points. We apply the rounding rule to get a total of 17 out of possible 20 points for this component. And we're going to take a pause here. You guys are welcome to unmute yourself and ask any questions, or chat box is helpful too. Okay, I didn't see anything come in. All right, our third component is student learning gains. And so student learning gains is also measured by the FAST STAR Early Literacy Assessment. This metric is going to look at what percentage of eligible children demonstrate sufficient gains between PM1 and PM3. A provider must have at least 4 eligible children with both PM1 and PM3 assessments to receive points for the student learning gains component. An eligible child can demonstrate sufficient gains in 2 ways. They can demonstrate a growth rate at or above the minimum, which we'll look at on the next slide, or maintain the highest literacy classification, which we'll take a look at on a couple slides here. So when we are looking at growth rates for students, we're looking for students to have a growth rate of 12 or more unified scale score points per month for a school year program, or 40 or more unified scale score points per month for the summer program. Growth rate is going to be calculated by subtracting a student's PM1 score from their PM3 score, then dividing by the number of calendar days between PM1 and PM3 administration dates, and that gets multiplied by 30. So please note that we're looking at calendar days, not instructional days. We're also looking at the actual dates on which a child was assessed, not the number of days in between the PM windows. This is a sample calculation for a student. So if a student took PM1 on August 15th, 2024, and received a score of 612, they then took their PM3 test on August 15th, 2025, and received a score of 710. There are 243 days between August 15th and April 15th. So we have 710 minus 612 divided by 243, multiplied by 30, which gives us 12.09. So this particular student would have demonstrated sufficient gains for this school year program. Please note there's no rounding applied to calculating student growth rates. If our student averaged 11.99 points per month, they are close, but they would not have made sufficient gains. Remember, I told you that there was 2 ways for students to demonstrate sufficient learning gains. And so the second way is that students can maintain a unified scale score in the highest literacy classification of probable reader at both PM1 and PM3. So in STAR Early Literacy classifications are the stages of development students go through as they become more proficient in literacy skills. And each stage is tied to unified scale score range, and the ranges vary based on grade level. So we know that children maintaining a score within the highest literacy classification, which is 852 or higher, this is defined as a probable reader. And for some context, a VPK student scoring an 852 scale score is typically not expected until 1st grade. So children at the beginning of the VPK program year that score at that highest literacy classification of a probable reader may have great difficulty growing at a monthly rate of 12 plus points, since they're already demonstrating mastery of VPK expectations and they're well above kindergarten readiness status. The expectation for these children is to maintain the highest literacy classification. And if children meet this expectation, then they are deemed as meeting the learning gain requirement. Here's the next calculation for component 3. So a VPK provider can earn up to 30 points in the student learning gains component. Actual points are earned depending on this particular calculation. We look at the number of eligible children with sufficient gains. Again, remember 12 points or more per month for a school year program, 40 points or more per month for a summer program. That gets divided by the total number of eligible children who took PM1 and PM3. That gets multiplied by 100, multiplied by 0.30. That gives us the total number of learning gain points. And this score must also be a whole number, so they will be rounded up or rounded down based off that decimal place value. This is a sample calculation for component 3. So this particular provider had 11 eligible children take the STAR early literacy at PM1 and PM3. 6 of those children had growth rates of 12 or more points per month, and 1 child tested as a probable reader on both PM1 and PM3. So we have a total of 7 children demonstrating sufficient gains. So 7 divided by 11, multiplied by 100, multiplied by 0.30. This provider earned 19.09. We apply the rounding rule for a total of 19 learning gain points out of a total of a possible 30. Okay, we're going to take a pause here.
So Lexi, this is Nancy. I just wanted to ask one clarifying question that came up, I think, in a previous conversation or presentation. In order for the calculation to be used towards the performance metric, the child has to be tested within that PM window, correct? If they're tested a day before or a day after, then that will not be used in the calculation.
Correct. It has to be during that PM window.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I read through my notes and I wanted to make sure that I had written it down correctly.
Yeah, we encourage teachers and directors to use the STAR early literacy assessments outside the PM windows to get an idea of where your students currently are at, to identify skills that you may need to teach before the next PM window. But those scores that are outside of that PM window will not be used for these calculations.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can you tell me, how does this all come into play when you have a classroom of children that have a high percentage of children in the classroom that have special needs and are receiving actually the ELC school readiness rate for special needs?
So we're taking out, are these VPK students?
Yes.
Okay. We still encourage them to take the PM testing, the STAR early literacy testing. Give them those 3 attempts as much as possible. We want as many students as possible to be able to take those assessments. Obviously, we know that not every student can. It's not developmentally appropriate for them. They have a language barrier, but we want to try and make that the exception and not the rule. So we are encouraging all providers to still try and facilitate the STAR early literacy tests.
But in the long run, that affects the program's ability to provide VPK in the future. Is that correct?
Depending on the performance metrics and calculations, I'll show you here in just a couple slides kind of what the baseline is for these calculations. And so if we've got, a pretty solid class composite score and, majority of our students are making sufficient gains or showing that 707 kindergarten readiness, then the STAR early literacy component 2 and component 3 data should still be within the meets expectations range.
But what if they're not? These kids are hurting their scores and the possibility of being on probation and having a contract withheld.
Yeah, so the actual rule for providers on probation is still being finalized at this time, so I don't have that complete language quite ready yet. It goes before the Board of Education here in April.
Because clearly, I mean, if we've gone through the process, with the Early Learning Coalition and these children receive additional funding based on their special needs, there needs to be some sort of accommodation for that.
Once they hit public school, aren't they waived out of having to pass these tests?
Unfortunately, I don't know that information, Carolyn. I'm sorry.
I just want to point out too that since it is a balance of 3 calculations, from the data that was compiled from 22-23, we have less than 20 providers who scored below meets expectation. So it really is a balance. And like Lexi said, if children do not meet the 3 testing requirements or they can't be tested, just like you would now, you put them in as a non-participation status if they truly cannot be tested. So shortly we should be getting some of the informational data for last year for 23-24. So when you take a look at that and see how the scores break down in categories, it really is a balance.
Great questions, though. Thank you guys for asking them.
I do have a question. I may be wrong in this, but previously when we used to have scoring before, it was based on students that had completed like 80% of our program or more. Now we're going to students completing 50%. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's correct.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, we know that some students switch programs, partway through the year. So trying to achieve that 80% is really difficult. And so in order to be able to have data for these component calculations, we're requesting that at least 4 students have completed at least 50% of the program in order to be included in that component calculation.
So then let's say we receive a student from another program that completes only 50% of our program, we get penalized for that student not really obtaining a good score in PM1 if they came to us, let's say, towards PM2, PM3?
So they wouldn't be able to be calculated in the learning gains component, but they could be included in the student achievement component. So we still want them to try and be achieving that 707, but in order to try and kind of push the...
But you would use like the PM1 from like their previous facility?
No, we would not use PM1 from the previous facility.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. You guys got some good questions. And Jane made a good comment. Even if they are scoring lower, we are still looking at gains. Yes. Okay, so the next couple things. So a performance metric calculation, if a provider has at least 4 eligible children and data for all 3 components, a performance metric will be calculated and released within 45 days of the program end. And so we have up to 50 points for program quality points, up to 20 points for student achievement points, and up to 30 points for student learning gain points, for a possible 100 points for the performance metric. We had some example calculations with the random for our sample provider throughout this presentation. So this provider earned 20 points from their class score, 17 points for their student achievement, 19 points for the student learning gains. So this provider would have earned 56 performance metric points. Designations will be assigned to providers based on their performance metric points within 45 days of the program end. And so we are looking for providers to have a minimum of 28 points of combined across the 3 components in order to demonstrate that they are meeting expectations. Providers who do above expectations and excellent, fantastic. For providers who are demonstrating below expectations or unsatisfactory, those providers will be placed on probation. So providers receiving the designations of meets expectations, above expectations, and excellent have successfully implemented the VPK program. Providers receiving the designations of below expectations and unsatisfactory are identified as needing improvement and therefore will be placed on probation. Again, the VPK providers on probation rule is going to the board for approval here in April. So once that has been finalized, we can share that information. We are waiting on that to get finalized though. If for some reason you don't have data for one of the three components, for instance, you just didn't have enough students for your student achievement component, you'll receive a designation of incomplete. If a provider receives a designation of incomplete, that language is also going to the board with providers on probation to be finalized, but that's going to look like a technical assistance plan. You will be working with DEL and your ELC to identify, what barriers there were for you to have data for that particular component and come up with a plan to make sure that the following year you do have data for that component. There are a couple of special circumstances here. So if a child does not complete progress monitoring during a provider's PM1, they cannot count in the calculation of that particular provider's learning gains component. This includes students who have delayed enrollment or re-enrollment, 3 attempts resulting in failed practice, or other non-participation status types. However, these children can count in the achievement component if they attend more than 50% of instructional hours at that provider, and if they complete progress monitoring during PM3. So we really want to stress that the expectation is for providers to plan their progress monitoring so that a child who is unable to complete the practice the first time they try has enough days left in the progress monitoring window to try again a second, and if needed, a third time. We know that this is not always feasible, for children who enroll after a VPK class has started, but this, again, should be the exception rather than the rule. We want children and providers to have every opportunity to show off their growth. So this was the implementation timeline. The Board of Education approved the VPK Provider Performance Metrics and Designation Rule back in August 2024. The Division of Early Learning released the 2022-2023 metrics and designations for informational purposes only. 2023-2024 metrics and designations are still being finalized. We're hoping for end of March, early April for those to be released. Division of Early Learning is bringing the amended VPK Provider on Probation Rule to the Board of Education here in April 2025. June 30th, 2025 is the official 2024-2025 VPK school year session ends. And so after that point, DEL has 45 days from that point to calculate and release the 2024-2025 school year metrics and designations. There's a couple things I want to show you really quickly.
Because I was just going to get up and say, did she pay?
So on the
VPK.
VPK Provider Program Accountability webpage, there are a couple resources on here for you. There is a guide for calculating VPK accountability, which goes over all of the information that we just went through in our presentation. So this is a great resource to help it break it down a little bit easier. The 2022-2023 VPK Provider Performance Metrics and Designations are also posted on here. These are for informational purposes only. As soon as the 2023-2024 metrics and designations have been released, they will also be on this webpage as well. If you were offering VPK program in 2022-2023, I would recommend coming to this PDF document and taking a look at what you would have scored if this metric and designation was in place at that time. And again, once the 23-24 metrics and designations are released, if you offered a VPK program in that school year, again, I would highly recommend taking a look at the document and seeing what you would have scored if this had been in place. The 24-25 year is where it's really going to count. So start, taking a look at your class scores, start taking a look at your FAST data, kind of start getting an idea of where things are headed for your program. And if you need any supports, feel free to reach out. I'm here to help. I know Jancy's always willing to help. And, any questions that you have that come up, we know it's stressful. It's a lot to take in. And I think I saw some questions in the chat box.
Yes, so Nicole had a couple of questions about Spanish speaking students. So the Renaissance is only in English. Should they, if there's a Spanish speaking child, do they still need to attempt the assessment?
We encourage it, yes.
Okay. And then the other question she had was, can a child take the assessment more than once in the PM window? And if so, what score is used?
So if they attempt to take the test during the PM window and have 3 failed practice attempts, they will have 2 more practice attempts to try and get a score during that PM window. However, if a child goes and takes PM3 and completes their test on that day, that's the score that's going to be held to that child. It's not like, I'm going to take the test 3 whole times and hopefully they get a better score on the 3rd time. Whichever test that they complete during that PM3 window, the first time is what the score is going to be calculated as.
Okay. Thank you. And I did put the link to the VPK Program Accountability website in the chat too. And I don't see any other questions in the chat. Anyone feel like unmuting and asking their question?
Did you say that there was that we had already been scored previous to this for last year?
Yes. So
is there a way to see that score, like just so that we can have an idea like where we're landing on this?
So if you offered VPK in 2022, 2023, those scores are available on that VPK accountability website that Jancy dropped in the chat box. The 2023-2024 scores are still being finalized. We expect those to be released for informational purposes only here at the end of March, early April. And so once those are released, those will also be posted to that VPK accountability website as well. We'll be sending out a mass email to all of our ELCs and school districts with that document too. So as soon as Jancy receives it, I'm sure she'll be sharing it out with you guys.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm going to drop my email in the chat box in case anybody has any follow-up questions that you think of after today's presentation. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm happy to answer any questions. There's a lot of math, there's a lot of calculations, there's a lot of what if this, what if that. Some of it we've had to work through over the past few months to make sure that we have this very clear and ready to go. And there's been a lot of great questions that have really made us kind of think further on the supports that we're providing for you guys. So any feedback you have for us is greatly appreciated.
And I think that's why I've attended the presentation probably 3 or 4 times now, because people ask such great questions. I'm always amazed because sometimes I'm like, oh, I never thought about that, but it's really important to know.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you have questions, please speak up, please ask, reach out to me as well. And if I don't know the answer, I will do my best to find it. So
are you going to email the link also?
I'm sorry, I have one last question. You said on the VPK program accountability, if we did, I guess if we completed VPK for the 22-23 school year, is that for everybody that completed that program, or are you just talking about certain providers?
So if you offered VPK in the 2022-2023 school year, you have an informational purposes only performance metric and designation on that website.
Okay, I'm just not seeing my center on there, but I'll look again closely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome.
I have one question.
Yeah.
And I think I know the answer, but the class score is the school's class score. So like if our VPK scored great, but somebody else brought them down, we're still going with the composite scores. That's correct?
It's the VPK program composite score.
So just their classroom or the entire school score? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. If you only have one VPK classroom,
Yeah.
then that class score is what's going to be used for program quality. However, if you have like 2 or more VPK classrooms at your program, the composite score for those VPK classrooms, it's what's going to be used for program quality.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are you going to email the website also? Because we're not seeing it in the chat box in order to get
Yes.
this.
Yeah, I will send out an email later this week with the recording, and I'll put the links in there that we mentioned, and I'll see if I can find a way to drill down the.
Again.
Oh, thank you. The informational 22-23 data is for the whole state. If I can find a way to pare it down to just Volusia and Flagler and make it a little bit easier to read, I will do that, and I'll send that out as well.
Okay.
It's a huge document.
Yes, with very small print. Very, very small print.
Does anybody have any other questions about VPK accountability?
I see Megan has a question about non-VPK, so we'll get to that after we make sure all of our VPK questions are answered.
All right, well, I will just.
I do have, sorry, one last question. When this is all getting done, when do we actually see like the scoring for that program year? Does it take, is it like the following school year that we're getting that scoring, or during the summer? What's the time frame?
Yeah, so all of the school year programs that offered VPK here in the 2024-2025 year, the official end date for school year programs is June 30th, 2025. So everybody who offered a school year program will be receiving their performance metrics and designations by August 14th, 2025.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And if you
poor baby.
if you offer both a school year program and a summer program, those are 2 separate designations and performance metrics. So you'll receive a performance metric and designation for your school year program, and then you'll receive a separate designation and performance metric for your summer program. All right, I put my email in the chat box. I will hang out here on mute for just a few more minutes in case anybody has any further questions, but I'll let Jancy take over for the non-VPK questions.